Chapter 2. Compared to the bargain, the wedding is not much to speak of. In short, the priest delivers the vows. The prince and I nod when we're told to. In an act I might have called kindness, the priest loftily omits the troublesome part about death. Other than that, it's a short, emotionless ceremony, and there are precisely 0 well-wishers. The villagers scurried off as soon as it was hinted that they were no longer needed. The prince's guards bear solemn witness, but not one of them is congratulatory. These other fae are here to see a job done. That is all. After the ceremony, Ilo and my bag are collected, and I'm handed into the waiting pumpkin carriage. As it did on the night I first saw it, the coach glistens with the warm hues of fall. Its walls are of sparkling glass adorned in gilded leaves and swirls. The dome-shaped roof is draped in vibrant saffron-colored fabric. It sits upon 4 magnificent wheels, and a team of white stallions with graceful, flowing manes are harnessed to it. The interior is just as marvelous as the exterior, spacious and plump, resembling a ripe pumpkin in October. The seats are adorned with luxurious russet velvet. I take in the grandeur of the carriage as the prince converses with one of his attendants before settling onto the lavish cushioned bench across from me. With nary a lurch or a jolt, the horses surge forward, marking the start of our journey. Half of the knights ride on their stately mounts at the front of the carriage while the other soldiers fall into formation behind us. Their silver armor gleams in the moonlight in a way that seems unearthly. Yes, these fae are beautiful and lethal and terrible, their beauty matched only by their deadly capabilities. Yet despite their unnatural appearance, there's something hauntingly familiar about them. Something almost human. I can feel it, almost see it, like a small sparking ember of light hidden deep inside them. A small kernel of humanity, one I can almost reach and somehow unravel? I push the thought aside but can't help wondering what they were in the beginning before they became these other monstrous beings. An awkward stillness settles inside the carriage, but it's not entirely uncomfortable. The prince shifts in his seat and gestures towards a wicker hamper resting between us on the floor. "Are you hungry or thirsty?" he asks. I shake my head, still wondering over the carriage and the fey horses, so silent and so swift. Wondering at all the perfect, imperious men. Men? Were they simply men? The journey will be arduous, the prince warns. You would do well to eat or sleep if you can. Again, I shake my head. He frowns. Outside, the landscape races by, illuminated by an enormous, silver moon. As we move further into the country, the horses pick up their pace. With shock, I realize we're already skirting the forest where my cottage resides, nearing the boundary of almost all I have ever known. "Aurora," the prince whispers. I turn away from the window, ashamed of the tears that have begun running down my cheeks. Conscientiously, I swipe at the tracks of moisture. It isn't that I'm sad to be leaving, but there are memories here. Some of them are good. For one, there was Jens. This morning, after I'd received the summons, I'd plucked a bouquet of snowbells and left them on his grave. What bothers me more than the thought of leaving him behind is the thought of what might have been if he hadn't died in the first place. If my parents hadn't died. If I'd had a normal childhood. If Jens hadn't sickened last spring and then worsened, withering like an unplucked fruit on the vine. If nearly every waking moment of my life hadn't been a battle to simply survive. I'm sorry, I apologize to the prince. Embarrassed by my momentary lapse into feeling sorry for myself, a thing I didn't usually allow myself to give sway to, I attempt to bring my emotions back in check. I gesture to the forest quickly receding behind us and say something else entirely true. I didn't think leaving would matter to me so much. I understand. The prince truly seems to, and something about his sympathy soothes me. As I watch the last of that familiar forest recede, he retrieves a long-stemmed crystal flute from the hamper and fills it nearly to the brim with a sparkling, amber wine. If you don't wish to feel the emotions so keenly, this will help. Is it fey? I ask unnecessarily. Of course, it's fey. The prince simply extends the delicate glass, the tawny liquid bubbling up effervescently from the bottom of the slim flute. I won't offer pretty platitudes, he says quietly, seemingly enamored with the bubbles. If for nothing else, drink it to numb the pain of leaving. His eyes land on me, appraisingly. Then, rest. You'll need the sleep. Both of us will need it for what's coming. Desperate for answers, I ask, what is coming? My breaths come shallowly, my heart suddenly throbbing in my chest. The prince's expression turns sorrowful, but to his credit, he doesn't look away. There's more he'd like to say. Pausing, he considers his next words, seeming to fight 2 warring desires. Part of it is that I can't just tell you, he finally admits. He passes a distracted, white hand through his hair, slightly mussing it. A sign of his distress. I have to figure it out on my own. I repeat. How very unique. The prince winces, all too well aware that this is, indeed, not an altogether exceptional plotline where the Fae and human relations were historically concerned. Some things I can help with, he assures me. And I will do. He shows me the ring gleaming on his finger. This ensures I will, that you have all of me. As much as I can give. I can't stop that now, even if I wanted to. You promised to stand beside me, even unto death. That goes both ways. He shows me the ring again. Points to the twin ring on my finger. These will see it so. I sigh and take the slim flute he offers me. I know the potential dangers of drinking Fae wine. Not merely the danger of lowered inhibitions but of all the rest it could entail. Drink the wine of the Fae and be lost to them forever. Even a single drop. It's a more potent threat than the wedding vows I made in the cathedral. But not so potent as the bargain that we'd struck. Canny, says the prince, seeming to intuit my thoughts as I continue to study the sparkling wine, sniffing at it as if to test for poison. Little does the prince know, testing for poison is something I can do. That's if I happen to be dealing with human wine and poisons. That's good, the prince goes on, still watching me swirl the liquid in the cup again. I sniff the lip of the glass, scenting only sweet wine. You'll need to keep that wariness. Still, he tips back his chin, encouraging me to drink. I do, and it's delicious. Honeyed like the earliest days of fall, so early into fall that it still seems almost summer. When the lazy, waning sun lies fat and lush and ripe over the land and every other fat, lush, and ripe fruit and vegetable. Despite the bubbles, the wine goes down smoothly. It's like drinking that end of summer sun. I can taste each bursting grape along with the flowers and the herbs grown beside them. Hyssop and geraniums and wild blueberries. Delicious. I hand back the glass, but he fills it again, half full this time. Wordlessly, he passes it back to me. The second ration is also succinctly dealt with. More and you won't be able to function, the prince muses. Fairy wine is sweet but potent. I nod, already beginning to feel the effects of the light but cloying substance. I missed your name during the ceremony, I say, settling back into my seat as the prince finishes his serving of alcohol. After that, he draws out bread and cheese and cured meats, passing an assortment of them to me on a small cut glass plate that seems to match our champagne flutes. Suddenly, I'm famished. It's like the wine unlocked it, a hunger I didn't know was there. I tear into the food, marveling at the fullness of all the flavors. All around us, the landscape has opened up. The light from the moon lies in silvery waves upon the sleeping world, making everything seem like it's underwater. Still, colors lie all around us, muted but deep and more mysterious. Jewel-like. Emerald and peridot trees beginning to bud with pink sapphire and diamond gems. Am I drunk already? I say, passing my hand through a patch of silvery moonlight. It seems to gleam and sparkle, to glow against my fingers like I too am Fae and did not know it. Probably, says the prince. You look like you haven't eaten in weeks. It might have gone straight to your head. I'm not as sad, I realize. There's nothing back there I can't live without. I brought everything that matters with me. The eagle, says the prince. I nod. Eat. He gestures to the plate resting in my lap. Immediately, I take it back up, scarfing down the rest of the food he gave me. You don't know my name, the prince reminds me as he puts away the remnants of the meal. Perhaps, he's under the impression we mortals sing it often from our rooftops. With my stomach more full than it's been in months, I lean forward and poke him in the chest. People don't like to talk about you. I'd say, he says, that's more than fair. If we ever knew your name, we never say it now, I reply. But time seems to be doing something funny. Hop-skipping, making it difficult to follow a single line of conversation. The prince lifts an amused eyebrow, perhaps because I'm drawing letters in the air between us like I'm conducting a grand symphony. I run my arms and hands through that patch of glimmering moonlight, working if not music. Then an imaginary spell of companionship and trust. My name is Adrian. The name is musical, lilting. My arms fall still, hands landing gracefully in my lap. Adrian. I repeat it slowly, adoring the way it flows off my tongue, how it begins on a high note and then falls into a softer, gentler end. It's lovely. The prince, Adrian, seems not to mind the verdict. He yawns, once, then gazes at the empty spot on the bench beside me. Do you mind if I? The end of his request trails off apologetically. His brows furrowing, he gestures to the seat. What, sit? I say, surprised. He nods a little sheepishly, almost as if he's embarrassed or expects dismissal. As if he's been a solitary creature so long he craves nothing more than this. Simple contact. He doesn't expect it, but he yearns for it. Worries the request will not only be rejected, but that he'll be ridiculed for making it. "Come, Adrian. Of course, you are welcome beside me." He slides onto the seat. After that, it seems perfectly natural for my head to land on his shoulder. One of his arms twines around my back. He gathers me closer, covering us both in the voluminous folds of his warm, black-brown cloak. I marvel at how soft and dark that material is, of how it smells faintly of cinnamon and cloves, of autumn, and of him. Softly, I begin to cry. I'm not certain of the choices I'm making. That, or I'm absolutely certain. And know how it will end. The best that I can hope for isn't that I won't die, but that I won't disappoint him before I do. Adrian exhales deeply, a long letting go of something that's plagued him longer than I've been alive. Is he thinking something similar? Wondering if I'll have the courage to do what I've promised to do. One thing at a time. Sleep is what matters now. Exhausted from the physical and emotional exertions of the day, I drift into the blissful dark. When I open my eyes, Adrian is still napping. His lanky body is half propped against the side of the carriage, half sprawled across the bench. I'm lying right on top of him. I've been gathered into big, warm, cinnamon-scented arms, cradled, no crushed against his chest. From that vantage, with my ear pressed against his ribcage, I can hear each breath along with the strong, steady beat of his heart. This is the moment I realize how powerfully attracted I am to my new husband. I'm so attracted. It takes a moment for me to master it, for me to remember that we're riding together in a carriage made entirely of glass. To remember all the fey males surrounding us. It's been months since I've had sex. That pleasure ended as soon as Jens fell sick. After that, I'd had too many things to care for, even for late-night pairings. First and primary, there was Jens himself to tend. Terrified, I tried with all my best medicines to nurse him. Daily, nightly, whenever I could. Whenever he needed me. That had taken its toll, not that I had minded. Tending him was the best part of each day, even if it meant other things went undone. I tried my best to keep up, to milk the cows and feed the pigs and tend to our meager crops. To chop the wood for our fire and sell our increase in the market at the edge of town. To keep the fire going and food upon our table. Too many jobs for one person to do, all the while watching my companion dying. And me, dying a little each day beside him. Crying alone outside our cottage where he wouldn't be able to hear me. Wiping the tears away, washing my face in the stream, and going back inside to sing his favorite songs while I fed him broth with too few vegetables in it. I didn't marry Jens for love. I did it because I needed a strong partner. He did it for the same reason. It was a simple transaction, an agreement to stick together to try to make something more than either of us could do without a complementary collaborator. I always liked him. I wouldn't have agreed to marry him if I hadn't. But something had happened in the 5 years we worked so hard alongside each other. It happened as we plowed and planted our fields, as we laughed at each other's stupid jokes, and as we huddled by the fire in the deepest, darkest parts of winter, amusing each other with made-up stories. I loved him by the end. And nothing I did to try to save him worked, not even using the formidable healing medicines I'd learned from Grain. I'd done other miraculous things with that knowledge. Saved others in the village. Some things are beyond even the best knowledge and medicines. Jens' sickness was one of those things, and quietly, he slipped away. Day after day, a little more of him at a time. Until my heart was breaking. This man beneath me, this prince, he's kind and pretty and most of all male, so of course my body desires him. That is all it is. Carefully, I extricate myself from his limbs, doing my best not to wake him. Succeeding, I move to the other side of the carriage, working the knots from my neck and shoulders. My head is only slightly befuddled, leading me to believe we'd been sleeping for a good long while. Outside, the terrain is different than it was when we started. There are rolling hills of grass. The moon is still big, but the light seems softer and more muted, painting the vivid landscape in delicate colors. I move closer to the panes of glass, entranced by what I'm seeing. The green fields blur together, but they're sprinkled with full fields of other colors. Pinks and purples and bright yellows and blues. Then red. As far as my eye can see, a field of crimson poppies. This is where the battle was. I ask, sensing Adrian awake beside me. Yes, Adrian sighs. So many flowers. I knew there would be poppies. I didn't know there would be others. A field of blood red for the army that fell, he tells me, gazing out at the field in question. And a field for each of my fallen brides. Daisies and peonies and roses and lilies. There are hundreds of unique varieties. I don't know how the flower corresponds to the bride except that some are sweet and delicate, others unexpectedly resilient, and some so mysterious I never had a chance to understand them. Each one of them was beautiful. All of them are dead, I say stiffly. True, he says, surprising me. But there are Brides who are not accounted for in these fields of lovely death. Brides who didn't fall? He nods, and I tuck the knowledge away to think about later. The flowers signify that we're growing closer to the boundary between our lands, Adrian says. The laws of nature are different here. We'll be stopping soon. Half listening, I continue to look out at the beautiful but disturbing landscape. Do you know how to ride? Adrian inquires. No, not well, I admit, still looking out the window. I had chickens and pigs and a cow, but we didn't seem able to scrape enough together for a horse. That was something we were working toward. We continue forward, and the seemingly never-ending field of red flowers slowly transitions into a new landscape. A faint mist hangs over the open plains, interrupted by the sharp peaks of mountains in the distance. Lush pockets of green trees can be seen on the slopes where the mist doesn't obscure them. However, my focus is captured by a bright corona of white-blue light emanating upward toward the sky. You said you hunt with Ilo? Adrian recalls, giving no heed to the mysterious vista. When you hunt, do you favor any particular weapons? I shift in my seat and spare him a glance, disturbed by his line of questioning. He's studying me too intently. I can use a bow and arrow, I tell him, switching my full attention back to him. I didn't bother bringing them to the choosing. Weapons aren't allowed inside the church. I didn't think your soldiers would appreciate them, either. We'll remedy it as soon as we alight. Am I in danger now? I ask. You're always in danger, he replies with a tight look. But then his expression softens. Not as much as we're alone together in the carriage, but with these others. I interpret, gesturing to the armored males outside the carriage. I gathered that. Are there any we can trust? Yes, Adrian assures me, and we're safe for the time being. I return my attention to the landscape, still puzzling over the blue-silver glow far ahead on the side of that mountain. What is that? I inquire, pointing to the pillar of light. Starlight, he explains, gazing out at it, too. A kind of waterfall mingled with it. At my credulous look, he adds, as we near Fairy, the magic of our worlds meet and merge. Blur together. We call it the liminal lay. The waterfall of starlight? No, we call that Seren's Veil. I want to see it, I tell him.